What's up, everybody? Eric here. Excited today. I've got Noah Glass back on the channel. He is the founder and CEO of Olo. Noah, how you been?
Eric, I've been really good. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to see you. I think it was August of 2022 last time we spoke. Lots of exciting things have been happening at Olo. I kind of want to give an update to the community and just YouTube in general. So I appreciate you coming on the channel here today.
Yeah,
so
awesome to be back.
Congratulations on the quarter. So we had, looks like non-GAAP EPS 3 cents, beat by 2 cents, and revenue of $52.2 million, up 22% year over year, beat by 1.44 million. So congratulations on the quarter. And I just wanted to go through maybe some of the highlights there. There's some specific highlights that you'd like to point out to the audience today?
Yeah, I think our story has really evolved since our IPO in March of 2021. At that time, we were just known as this on-demand commerce platform, the order component of what we do today. And since that time, we've made a couple of acquisitions. We've launched OLO Pay. Now we have 3 product suites, Order, Pay, and Engage, and a much larger vision and great position for us to realize the opportunity ahead. We serve this massive industry, Eric. It's $1 trillion industry now, and it's still super early in the digital penetration and digital transformation of restaurants. And I love that we're now operating at the scale of 76,000 restaurants across 600 brands, 85 million restaurant guests, 300 integrated technology partners, and that we also have this great data asset that we've developed over, 18 years being in business. We have billions of transactions that we've done across the Olo platform. And that's really going to serve us well as we think about personalizing the experience for restaurant guests and upping the ante for restaurants.
That's exactly right, because you were founded in 2005, and a lot of people might not realize that because you didn't go public till years later, but definitely established business. And it's great to see a lot of the different product sets. You guys have some acquisitions and things, and it's great to see some of that cross-selling start to come to fruition. Of course, that's going to take time, especially when we've had kind of a turbulent economy, a lot of uncertainty in the markets and things like that. When you think of inflation, we had CPI today that was pretty much in line, slightly lower maybe than expectations, but the market is very kind of jitterish right now. Is the Fed going to pause? Are they going to cut? When's that going to happen? What's the economy look like? Are we going into recession? Those kind of things, So there's been a lot of uncertainty. It's been a roller coaster of a market. Coming public during that time makes it a little bit more volatile for you guys. But I think it's important. There's a lot of great companies that came public over the last several years, and a lot of them just because they're new IPOs or some of them are even SPACs. I think the retail investors, especially, they kind of shy away because they're just, worried about the companies. But, this isn't a company that was just a startup a couple of years ago. It's been around since 2005. So this is great. So I want to talk about a couple of different things here. So you had recent announcements and innovations. We have OLO Pay and Borderless, also Kroger Delivery. Can you just talk about some of these new customers and some of the different products that they're starting to use?
Yeah, let me start with OLO Pay. I think it's a pretty big evolution of our platform. It's integrating payments into the order platform and enabling restaurant guests to have a more frictionless checkout experience, use things like Apple Pay, use things like Google Wallet, keep a card on file, and be able to get through that checkout process faster. On the restaurant side, it being integrated into that digital experience, being digital first, it means that we're able to have a much higher authorization rate. We're at 98% authorization rate. That's 5 to 20% higher than industry standard. And we're able to reduce fraud dramatically by 85% versus industry standard. We're also able to, by making a frictionless experience, encourage that guest to order in a logged in, authenticated state. And that's a good thing for the guest that can access order history. It's a great thing for the brand as well, because the brand is now able to tie that order back to the guest profile. They're able to build that profile on who that guest is, what they like, and really then personalize the guest experience based on all the information they're able to glean. So that's been a hit of a product. It was something that we were pulled into by our customers, by our product advisory council, saying, Olo should help and do payments as well as the ordering platform, because there are so many problems when payments are being done by the legacy payment processors. We're trying to kind of retrofit e-commerce into what was really built for the in-store environment. So by doing that, it's really had a great audience from our customers, and it's really delivered on the things that we thought that it would from the guest experience side and from the restaurant operator side. It was the fastest of our product modules to get to $1 million in monthly recurring revenue. We just announced the deployment of Noodles & Company last night. That was the third quarter in a row that we've had an enterprise brand with over 300 locations come on to OLO Pay for their card not present processing. And it's been great. We've seen it successful in new deals, in legacy deals, in enterprise, in emerging enterprise, and across all segments: casual dining, quick service, virtual brands like Mr. Beast Burger. All of these have had a lot of success with OLO Pay, and we're thrilled to see it.
One thing that's, I think, good to talk about, you recently did a video that you guys released, kind of the vision of the future, which is really cool. I think it kind of has some great visuals and kind of shows you what that looks like. Is that something that's way far away, or how long will it be before we see the future of restaurant?
Yeah, it's funny. We debuted that video at our customer conference, which was about a month ago, the Beyond 4 conference. And at the end of it, I followed it by saying, hey, that's a vision of the future, but it's not as far off as you might think. Some of the elevated experiences there, like facial recognition that identifies you and is able to then give you access to that account that you have, where you can see past orders and have a card on file. Those are things that are coming soon on the platform. Some of the things like reading a license plate and tying back to that account. Some of the things like being able to pay through a QR code, or have what we call get up and go payment, where the platform already knows who you are, maybe based on a reservation that you've made being tied back to your payment credential. And at the end of the meal, you don't have to wait for a server to come over. You can just stand up, walk out. There's a default tip that you have on your account. You can obviously change that if you'd like over some period of time, but otherwise you're able to get up and go just like you do in Uber. So I think those things are near in. They're not some distant future. This isn't some pie in the sky sort of thing. The central theme of that video is guest centricity. That's the thing that makes Olo, I think, so differentiated in the space. We're not some behind the scenes restaurant technology, non-guest facing platform. We are the guest facing platform. We're tying every transaction, every payment, every reservation, every email, every coupon back to that guest record. And that's such an important thing in unlocking a future that revolves around guest centricity.
So how much of the restaurant space is digital now? And what's the vision there? Is it to be 100% digital? What's the vision?
Restaurants today are about 15% digital. And so we believe inevitably, you hear restaurants talking about this on their earnings calls, everyone is driving toward 100% digital. Why? Better guest experience, more efficient operation, more profitable, more productive restaurant. And also all of that data helps the restaurant tie everything back to a guest and operate in a way that is more personalized for the guest. And I would argue makes for a more hospitable experience. I think there's this concern when you hear about digital and restaurants, people think, oh, it's going to make it cold and transactional. Our view at Olo is the digital transformation of this industry is going to make restaurants more hospitable and able to really meet the needs of their guests in a whole new way.
That's excellent. I want to talk next about, Denny's Engage Suite. I'd like to understand this more because, I've followed the company for a while and I'm still not 100% clear on Engage Suite. So I'm sure that a lot of people watching this aren't either. So I think it'd be good to kind of highlight that a little bit. So tell us more about Denny's, how they're using Engage Suite, and maybe just break down the modules and what the vision for Engage is in the future.
Yeah, happy to. So Denny's was another deal that we announced last night on the earnings call of 1,400 plus unit legendary restaurant brand, now utilizing OLO Engage as their marketing stack. So what is OLO Engage? It is in part what we acquired back in November of 21, our first acquisition, a company called Wisely. And Wisely is a restaurant guest data platform, marketing automation, sentiment, and also a reservation and waitlist tool. Those are the four modules: guest data platform, marketing, sentiment, and what's called host. That's the reservation and waitlist tool. The thesis behind Wisely and our acquisition of Wisely was that the restaurant marketing stack was in need of an upgrade and an evolution, and that status quo was loyalty programs. You've all seen them: earn and burn loyalty programs, buy 9, get your 10th free, birthday club, email marketing, that sort of thing. And we felt that through a restaurant-specific vertical guest data platform, and the one that we worked with as a partner of Olo's and Wisely for 5 years at the time of the acquisition, we felt like this was the right marketing tech stack to bring to our customers and say, we now have product market fit. It's time for an evolution of the marketing stack, getting an understanding truly of guest lifetime value, not just for those that sign up for the loyalty program, but for all of your guests. If you can understand what every guest is worth to your business, that gives you the ability to really understand which of those guests are driving the majority of your revenue. So like any sort of 80-20 rule, Pareto Principle, the same holds in restaurants. It's typically the top 20% of your guests represent about 60% of your overall revenue. So understanding who those people are and how you can treat them differently and elevate their experience and make sure that they feel like a regular, and then of course go out and find more people that look like those people. That's a very valuable way of approaching marketing. And, before even email marketing and loyalty, restaurant marketing was about TV and radio and print and just sort of mass media spray and pray kind of advertising, not this one-to-one personalized marketing that's now possible with a platform like the guest data platform we now call OLO Engage.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's good. I appreciate you explaining that a little bit more. So Denny's is using that for all their locations, or is it kind of in a pilot right now? All of them?
No, we only announce things, just our protocol is when they're live broadly across, I think, over 80% of total locations. In Denny's case, all of their locations are using the guest data platform and the marketing component of Engage. We have a partner who is providing loyalty capabilities, and that enables really a full stack marketing solution for Denny's. Prior to adopting Engage, they had been on just a basic loyalty program. They saw this as the ability to elevate their ability to understand their guests and personalize the relationship with each guest through an evolved marketing stack.
Okay. So when you think of Olo, you think of, SaaS, software as a service. So when you think of Engage, is that also a recurring type subscription they're paying per restaurant then?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And is there transactional revenue on that as well? Or is it just...
There is, based on the messaging. So, sending through the marketing component of Engage emails and texts and push notifications, there is sort of a metered approach on that of charging on a transactional basis for the utilization of messaging.
So the more they use it, the more essentially revenue Olo can generate.
That's right.
Okay.
And also, of course, it's all of these things, order, pay, engage, are a flywheel. Order and pay really go together. They generate a lot of data. Engage is another opportunity to drive revenue, but if done successfully, and if it drives another visit, it's going to drive another order, another payment, and that also grows the data asset. So they're not a bunch of random capabilities. They're really all part of what we think is the flywheel of order, pay, engage that enables us to help restaurants get to 100% digital faster in a way that delights their guests and in a way that obviously grows revenue for Olo at the same time.
Well, we love flywheels at Fired Up Wealth, and it's always good to see those. It's good to have different ways to generate revenue. What percentage would you say Olo does in SaaS? So when you think of just software as a service, what percentage of revenue would be SaaS?
I don't know off the top of my head, Eric. It's pretty high. And the reason that it's so high is that's really the core of the business. Olo Pay and other kind of non-SaaS revenue components of our revenue makeup are relatively new. Right. Over time, that makeup will change, but it's the predominant source of revenue is that SaaS revenue. We actually think about it as what we call transactional SaaS, because on the order platform, the more transactions, whether they're takeout orders or delivery orders coming through the platform, that increases the revenue generated at that location for Olo in the given month.
Right. So it's like a bill.com is also, it's considered SaaS, but it's transactional. And then you have some of these other companies that are consumption based. You think of like database warehousing companies and things. So it's a newer thing. Generally when you think of SaaS, you're just thinking software as a service, recurring, and there's some that are like just pure play and others that aren't. And then it gets harder sometimes to understand how to value it. So what I'm trying to draw attention to here is that you guys are primarily SaaS at this point. And really the way I look at the the Olo Pay, the transactional SaaS, is it's kind of icing on the cake where, if they're using it more, it's going to bring more revenue to the company. And you guys are really in your infancy with that too. That's something I was going to ask later, but it's a good segue here. So I think on the earnings call, you mentioned something like, it might take up to 5 years to get at bats with each customer because they have renewal processes that are usually 5 years. And so what does that look like? I mean, it sounds like, if you're thinking a long-term investor, you're holding this, if you're buying this stock and holding it for long-term, tell us about what that opportunity looks like when you think of at bats when people renew.
Yeah, I mean, so to be clear on that point that I made, which is in the Q&A section, that would be sort of for full payments replacement, which is now something that's in scope for Olo Pay to serve.
Sure.
That's new. I'll explain in a moment, but we just announced a deal with Adyen. And Adyen, in addition to our partnership with Stripe, now gives us the ability to process card present transactions. So those are transactions that are done typically inside the restaurant on a kiosk, at the counter, with a server, with a payment sled, but the card is present versus digital transactions that we had been doing with Olo Pay. Those are card not present. So because digital was only 15% of total transactions, now the ability for us to do card not present digital transactions and card present transactions means that our opportunity for payments just increased sixfold. We have 6 times the payments volume that we can now address and 6 times the number of transactions that we can now address between what we have been doing with Olo Pay and the new capabilities that we've signed on to do with Adyen and we'll start piloting later on this year. So what I was referring to as replacing full stack payments is something that happens generally every couple of years at a restaurant brand. Now, to do just a card not present, just the digital transactions, it does not require that a restaurant rips and replaces their in-store card present processor. So we do have the ability to start the relationship with a restaurant just in the digital realm. And then when they're coming up for reassessing payments whole hog, they can say, okay, now we've seen the benefits of the Olo Pay approach, the ability to make for a better guest experience, generate more guest data for the restaurant. Now we want to do it everywhere. We now have the capability of serving restaurants. My point was just sort of about what the timeline will look like for that full opportunity. We processed about $25 billion of gross payments volume last year. And again, that's just the digital volume. So if you take that 15% and the 6x, it would be more like $150 billion of gross payments volume that would be addressable to us with the existing customer base over that time period.
So what it sounds like is this new partnership is really turning up the volume against, there's 2 main competitors I think of, and most people watching probably can figure out who those are. But when you think of payments processing, a lot of the payment processing that you were doing was like the card was stored offline, right? And they're doing it online, digital ordering. But now you're able to actually do it physical card in the restaurant. So
That's
like
right.
I might do a digital order, but I might pick it up still. And now I can use that card and Olo can benefit versus you guys have some partners that you guys use, of course. And there's always a lot of confusion about that with anything, especially when you think of enterprise SaaS. You're always going to compete in some areas, but then partner in others. You think of like a Micros or something like that. They're not doing nearly the scope you are, the breadth within restaurant, but they have that one component. But I'm sure you guys have APIs and partner with companies like that. And coming from a SaaS background, it makes sense. But I think a lot of people try to just compartmentalize it like there's this company and this company, and they both do exactly the same thing, but it's not really the case, especially when you look at Rails and some of the partnerships you guys have with Rails. And that's why I think Olo is a great opportunity, especially as a long-term investor, just because you guys have such a great footprint already and you're continuing to grow that. And I think when we get to the other side of this, with the market, I think the market will start to realize that a little bit more.
Thank you. One thing to add on is, what card present processing will also mean is that Olo can be the payment processor even for a transaction that's happening on the point of sale. So
Right.
You might order from a cashier. They might be ringing you up on an Olo Pay terminal in the future.
So
what's interesting about that is I think what you're referencing is that a lot of people associate point of sale and payments as being joined at the hip.
Right.
That's true in SMB. That's true in small restaurants. You have a lot of players who are payments companies that offer a lightweight point of sale. You have point of sale companies that offer payments. In the enterprise world that we play in, that's really not the case. And historically, when we've plugged into restaurants, we've had to do two integrations, one to the point of sale system to deposit orders, and one to the payment processor to send transactions into. So we're not having to rip and replace the entire point of sale system. That is not what this opportunity is about. We're just giving a better digital first experience, guest centric experience for payments that again pulls that data back into the guest data platform and is highly strategic for the restaurant by serving as the payment processor.
Yeah, excellent. I appreciate that. So I also want to talk about Omnivore Acquisition. We've got all these different names, and it sounds like you have a lot of products. It'd be interesting to know exactly how many products there are. But this Omnivore acquisition, what new products and what's the vision with this acquisition?
Yeah, Omnivore is a company that we acquired in March of last year. And what's really cool about Omnivore, in addition to adding 100 new technology partners to our partner ecosystem, is that Omnivore has the ability to enable what we call open check. And open check is key to an in-restaurant, on-premise dining experience through digital. So it gives you the ability to do things like place an order, add on to that order, add a round of drinks, add dessert, and only at the end of the transaction, close that out on one tab. It also gives you the ability, open check, to order in the traditional way with a server who's adding the order to your tab and then check out yourself through a QR code, through the get up and go kind of payment that I described earlier. It also enables hybrid experiences. You might place the order for appetizers. The server may come over and take the order for your entrees. And at the end, you might scan a code and walk out when you're ready. That sort of thing hasn't been possible in restaurants until now. And what's very exciting about it is it opens up that on-premise set of transactions that still represent 24% of total restaurant transactions to be addressable by digital. And so as we think about 100% digital, that's not just about pickup and delivery and drive-through. It's also about those transactions that are happening inside the four walls of the restaurant and elevating the experiences there.
So how does that work exactly? That's through the app? Is that right? Or what does that look like? I'm trying to...
Yeah. Well, so let's take the example of you placing the order at the table. You can scan a QR code, view the menu, place the order. The order gets sent into the point of sale system and left open. You're then able to go back into that order, back into that tab, and add more items onto it. You're not asked to pay with every time that you want to send an order into the point of sale system. At the end of the transaction, when you decide to end it or the server takes your payment, then you close that tab and you're on your way.
Okay.
What had been the case before, built for takeout and delivery transactions, we would always just, as I mentioned, make sure the payment cleared and then fire the order into the point of sale as a closed transaction.
Right.
So open check enables that natural on-premise experience of a multi-course meal, whether it's you placing it digitally or a server taking the order for you or some combination of the two, without this kind of halting experience of every time I want to order anything, I have to put my credit card in, add a tip and pay. And then if I want to order another round of drinks, I have to do that all over again. That kind of doesn't feel like the most hospitable experience, whereas open check mimics that natural experience that we have in restaurants when we're on premise of building an order kind of course by course and paying at the end.
Can you name a couple companies that are using that right now? Just to get an idea.
A great example of this is a company called Nandos. Nandos is an international chain. We started working with them actually in Canada and only then started working with them in the US. A number of locations sort of in the mid-Atlantic region, a company that was started in Johannesburg, South Africa many years ago. They're using the QR code ordering capability today, and it's just radically changed their business. The standard default thing to do is you come into the restaurant, a host greets you, shows you to your table. Instead of having to get up and go to the counter to place an order as you had to in the past, you now just scan a QR code at the table, build that order tied to the table number, and they then run the order out to you when the food is ready. So that's an example of on-premise ordering. It's not an example of the open check capability, but that's a fast follow, obviously, for experiences like that.
Okay, that's a good example. Yeah, I mean, you guys work with so many different customers. I mean, one that always comes to mind, I believe, just tell me if we need to cut this part out or whatever. But Wingstop is one that comes to mind, and that company's been kind of on fire and they're growing. You guys have been working with those guys for a long time, and there's some huge names. You think of like Shake Shack, we're talking about Denny's, we're talking about all these different companies, and I think a lot of people just don't realize, because you said earlier that you are customer facing, but at the same time they don't always see your logo.
That's right.
If you go and you see like a Micros, and I use Micros just because it's all over the place, especially when you think of like the old school model for businesses, it's very legacy in my opinion, but you see that and you see the logo, or you see like different, devices that might get handed to you that's got a logo. And the thing is that you actually might be part of that whole system, but you're not always customer facing where the logo is in your face. It sounds like that's going to change more with some of these new opportunities that you guys have maybe. But I guess that's interesting though. And I think it's important for potential investors to understand just how many brands you guys work with. What's the number of brands that you guys are working with?
So we work with now over 600 brands, all that are enterprise or emerging enterprise brands. You make a really interesting point, Eric, which is that Olo is in the background. We're behind the scenes. We're not viewed by the guest. The technology is the guest-facing technology, but it's white labeled. It has the restaurant brand's name on it. Where that's changing is in what we're doing with Borderless. And the idea of Borderless is initially just enabling passwordless checkout for the guest. So they can create an account tying their email address and their mobile number together to authenticate themselves. No password needed. And then they're able to do things like store a card on file, pay with Olo Pay, so things like Apple Pay, Google Wallet. They're able to have those orders, that order history on file. They're able to have delivery addresses on file, maybe car, make, model, color on file. But they're able to then get into that account the next time around just by using that email address. And it sends a challenge text to their phone instead of saying, hey, Eric, do you remember your password? I never remember passwords. I almost dislike experiences that make me create a password or create an account or remember a password because of that and wind up ordering anonymously. The problem with that is I then have to go through the entire process of rebuilding the order that I did last time, re-entering my delivery address, re-entering my credit card details. I want to be able to have that passwordless experience where I can just get into my account, reorder with my delivery address, my payment on file. That's what Borderless is at the restaurant brand level. The power of it is that it makes for that better guest experience, and it enables the restaurant to have that transaction tied back to my guest profile and understand who I am as a guest and build that profile on me. Beyond just at the brand level, Borderless is actually the first time that Olo is showing up to a guest and saying, hey, Eric, you're saving your account with Olo. And if you go to other brands that also use Olo, put in that same email address. We're going to send your same mobile phone that challenge text, and then we'll know who you are, how you want to pay. That card on file is at the platform level. That's really powerful for us in sort of taking inspiration from what we've seen Shopify do with the Shop app and the Shop Pay experience, and creating that utility for the guest and enabling our restaurant brands to kind of have that frictionless experience that marketplaces have today without requiring the password that direct channel restaurant experiences require. So I think it's a great win-win-win. It's a win for restaurant guests. It's a win for restaurant brands. And it's a win for Olo because it's the first time that we're sort of showing a little bit behind the curtain that, hey, we're here, we're powering 600 plus of your favorite restaurant brands, digital ordering and delivery and payment experiences. And you don't have to create an account at every single one of them. You have that account already.
Yeah, that's smart. From a business perspective, you're getting that name recognition and kind of like free advertising in a sense. And people are funny that way. When you see the same logo every time you log in, like you recognize that. And I've had people like in Discord and things like that say, hey, I went to this restaurant and I saw this, company logo, and they're interested in looking at the stock just because they saw that, logo. So that can be powerful, especially when you think as a business owner and you think of just getting exposure and awareness, because it's funny, the reality of what's out in the real world, like if you think of restaurants, most large restaurants, especially if they're franchises, they know who Olo is. But if you ask the average Joe on the street, they have no idea what that is, right?
That's right.
So I think that's important, and it's a good next step for your business when you think of just the expansion and moving forward. So I'm happy to hear that, and I think it's good to share that with the audience. One thing I want to point out, it looks like you have $60 million left in stock buybacks. You guys have done some more share repurchases in this last quarter and have 60 million authorized. Doesn't mean they necessarily will, but you're authorized to do so if you think it's attractive. And then the last thing I kind of want to talk about here, and it's always great talking to you, and we can talk for hours, it feels like. There's actually two things. I wanted to ask you, number one, I want to ask you about pipeline and just overall kind of off the record, what the macro looks like. So I'm not saying that you're an economist or you can predict what's going to happen in the future, but you are a CEO that has insight into restaurants. When you think about restaurants, some of it's, discretionary, especially specific brands. So people still have to eat, but their spending might go down and things like that. So what's that look like in terms of the environment, number one, for the macro, and just, are people eating out more or less? And maybe you don't know, but if you can tell me, and then what the pipeline for Olo specifically, looks like as we move forward.
Yeah. So I'll start with the macro. The nice thing about being in the restaurant vertical is that food is largely non-discretionary. People have to eat. They eat 1,000+ times every year. They're eating more and more at restaurants. They're cooking less and less. That's a long-term trend toward restaurants that just surpassed grocery in terms of aggregate spend. Restaurants are now $1 trillion+ industry. We've lived through the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. What we saw then and what we're seeing now, consumers don't trade out of restaurants. They don't magically learn how to cook. They trade down, to your point. They stop going to really high-end restaurants or stop going as frequently, and they trade down to less expensive restaurants, limited service restaurants. We're lucky in that that's the segment that we serve. We serve primarily limited service restaurants, enterprise brands that have financial strength and have a price point that makes them very attractive for the guest. We've even seen guests prioritizing delivery and the convenience of delivery at the expense of maybe trading down in their basket size. So maybe I'm ordering a smaller check, less food or less expensive items to make room for the convenience of delivery. But I think what we see is that, from the Olo demand perspective, restaurants feel like they need to do more with less, and they don't want to sacrifice the guest experience. So tools that enable a guest to feel like a regular, that enable the guest to have an elevated experience, while at the same time making the restaurant more efficient and able to do more with less, are a hot commodity. And that is the through line from the very beginning of online ordering to delivery to payment to engagement. All of the things that we do are about making the restaurant able to do more with less while elevating the guest experience. So I also see restaurant brands that have built in-house historically and maintained their tech stack in-house are having a rethink on that strategy. Does it really make sense for us to continue maintaining and keeping secure and high performance and innovative our own ordering platform? Or could we benefit from using a platform that is a SaaS platform and doing this at the scale that Olo is doing it? At 76,000 restaurants, that's 5 times the number of McDonald's that there are in the US. It's a notable scale. And we have a system that is high performance, secure, reliable, and incredibly innovative with a partner ecosystem of 300 technology partners that extend the use cases far beyond what we can do ourselves. So I think there are a lot of reasons why restaurants are looking at Olo and thinking about what pieces of Olo can I use, or should I go full stack Olo to accelerate towards 100% digital? And everybody is looking at that as the North Star.
That's awesome. Okay. It's a good answer. And, I think one thing when you talk to people, like we've got a private Discord community, we've got people that are everywhere from age 19 to 75. And if you talk to the older generations, they can't comprehend that people would pay to have food delivered and pay a fee, or even to have like wings delivered. Why wouldn't you just go to the restaurant? But the reality is that especially, you think of millennials, but especially Gen Z, this is more and more commonplace. And as you go down that scale, it's more and more accepted and just kind of like normalcy, correct? To buy something, and not saying that not everybody does it, but I'm saying it's a trend when you think of as people age, when those people coming up, it seems like it's more and more common for the younger generations to order things online, to be willing to pay a fee for that convenience. Whereas someone that's, 75, it might be completely Greek to them. Like, why would anybody pay a fee to do that kind of a thing, right?
Yes.
So I think it's important to just at least paint that picture, because it is the truth. It is the reality. You think of some of these companies that have been doing well, these restaurants have been doing well through these turbulent times. A lot of that comes down to the ability to be digital, to be able to get delivered with DoorDash and those type of companies. And you guys work with those with Rails and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's an exciting time, and disruptions happening everywhere, even in restaurant. And this is a good segue to the last question. This is a hot topic. Everybody wants to talk about it. And it kind of gets to the point, if you remember, metaverse was overused for a while, and everybody was using metaverse. Yeah. And then it kind of got thrown out. It was a little bit of a fad. Now, the reality is that AI has been around for a long time. We've been talking about it on this channel since 2019 when nobody wanted to talk about it. And there are some really powerful enterprise applications and scale when you think of artificial intelligence. I think the problem is everybody wants to kind of throw that word out and get on the hype train, but there are legitimate reasons to use AI, and it is coming. And I want to talk about what that looks like when you think of OLO and AI, but generative AI, and how it can be used to improve and enhance your business.
I'll give you 4 ways in which we're using AI today. And some of it is the obvious and sexy stuff. And some of it is like, oh, that's totally behind the scenes. That's totally in the weeds, but that is really smart. I'll start there. The first way that I'm really excited about using AI is in capacity management in the kitchen. So restaurants get, as you know, super busy at peak times, and knowing how much spare capacity a restaurant has is essential for a platform like ours, especially as we're acting as the traffic cop between direct channel orders, indirect channel orders, flagship brand, virtual brand orders that are all coming into that kitchen. So our goal is to keep the kitchen as productive as possible and as profitable as possible. We've done integrations into the kitchen display systems using real-time information to then use machine learning to understand the true capacity in the moment and to understand what the quote time for a specific order with specific items being ordered should be. That is an incredibly powerful tool, that new capacity management, AI and machine learning tool. We have major casual dining brands that are using it and saying, this is the brains of my operation now. Super powerful use of AI. The sexy, obvious things, voice ordering through the drive-thru. We have 4 different companies that are doing pilots on top of the OLO ordering API to enable a chatbot or interactive voice response to take your order at the drive-thru and then send that order into the kitchen. In payments, I mentioned the authorization rate being 98%. I mentioned fraud rates being down 85%. That's because of our partnership with Stripe and the work that they've done on AI and understanding who that guest is. Is it a user that should be authorized, or is it a fraudulent user? That scoring is super powerful in making OLO Pay far superior than legacy processors. And then on the engagement side, personalization of the experience based on knowing who you are, what you've ordered in the past and liked, what you've disliked, and especially what people like you, lookalikes like you, have loved and that you've never tried. That's incredibly powerful stuff. That's what Netflix does to recommend shows and movies to you. It's what Amazon does to recommend products to you. It's not something that restaurants have ever been able to do. You go to a restaurant, what's good? What are the specials? They're not giving you a tailored recommendation just for you, but now they can. And they can do that because we have a database of 85 million users. We have a database of billions of transactions and 2 million more transactions every day that we can use to hone in on what is the thing that Eric would like most on a Wednesday at 2:30 in the afternoon, right? Like, that's incredibly powerful as a data asset for us to then put into kind of the OLO IQ behind personalization within the Engage platform. And it's about the menu that you see. It's about the recommendations that we make for you, maybe about the offers that we send out to you if you're subscribed for offers based on things that we know you're going to like. I'm really excited about that. It's the core of that guest centricity and the two-sided network, the scale of the network that we've created over 18 years.
That's excellent. I usually, when I go to a restaurant, especially if it's a new one, I always ask the server, what's good here? And I always get a look like, I don't know, like they eat there every day. It used to be something you would ask and I felt like I got an answer. And now it's like, it's kind of old school to ask that question. I feel like, I don't know, I always get a weird look every time I say, what's good here? And the server kind of looks at me like I'm crazy. So
I'll tell you a little, kitchen confidential like secret. If you want to get the thing that the chef really wants to get rid of, ask the server, what's good here?
That's true.
What does the chef recommend?
That's true. That's probably a good point. So Sometimes I get legitimate answers though, and I've had some really good experiences with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, I can see where that could be an issue.
But if you knew that person was just like you and liked all the same things that you liked, and they're like, oh, Eric, you got to try this thing. Or, hey, Eric, I brought you a sample of this thing. You've never tried it before. I know that because we can see you've never tried it, but I know you're going to love it. Maybe next time you'll order it. Like that would be a magical hospitality experience you would never forget. If they brought you a little sample of some dessert and they were like, this is going to be the one for Eric. 98% probability in our platform that it's going to be a direct hit bullseye for him.
It's a good point, because if I ask the server and it's a 20-year-old female that weighs 97 pounds, it's probably not the same. She doesn't like the same stuff I probably like. So, you know what I mean? So, hey, no, I always appreciate having you on the channel and coming on. And I like talking to you a lot. And if I'm in New York, I want to hit you up. Maybe we'll grab a cup of coffee or something sometime. But I appreciate you coming on today. We could talk a lot more, but I know I want to respect your time. Have a great rest of your day. I appreciate it.
Eric, thanks so much. You as well.
Thanks, Noah. See ya.